Excellent panel. We are going to transition to our final panel of the afternoon. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our moderator. We could not be at Facebook today without speaking about social media. And our final panel will present social media platforms and how we can make the best use of them. Let me introduce Cameron Johnson. Cameron is our moderator today. Cameron Johnson was elected to the San Carlos City Council in November of 2013. For his day job, he is Director of Product Innovation at Netflix. Prior to Netflix, Cameron was Director of Product Management at Yahoo. Cameron also serves as chair of the San Mateo County Mental Health and Substance Abuse Recovery Commission. He previously served on the San Carlos Economic Development Advisory Commission as well. Cameron has an MBA from Stanford and a BA in Political Science from Reed College. I'm pleased that Cameron could join us today and give us his insights, given his experience in both the public and private sectors, and he can provide some unique insight into both tech and government. And our last panel today is entitled Digital Darwinism, the Evolution and, it says adaption or adaptation. I'll go with adaption of social media. And where's Cameron? Is Cameron in the room? Cameron, there you are. Come on up. Cameron Johnson.
All right, guys. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me. So I think of social media, as at its basic level, a communication tool. And there's tons of jargon. There's tons of, insane details when you think about social media. But at its core, it's basically a tool. And what I'm hoping with today's panel is we can have some people who really understand these tools at a very in-depth level and provide some real practical examples for how we can use these tools in our public institutions. So for those of us that are involved in the public sector and in working in government, I like to think that we have a connection to thousands of years of history. People have been trying to organize themselves since there have been people, and these guys up here had access to this amazing disruptive technology, which was writing. So think about writing. It allowed you to transmit information from one generation to the next. It allowed you to actually write down the laws and put them up in a way where people could see. And, they carved them into stone tablets, and that seemed to be a good enough technology that they didn't really change it for 2,000 years. And after 2,000 years of innovation, somebody came up with in China the idea of paper. And paper allowed you to take information and transmit it over longer distances, so you didn't have to lug tablets on your back. So now you could send a message to the next village, or you could communicate, you could have diplomacy, you could write down the law, you could send it out to the province, and they could tell the people what the law was. And that was pretty good for about 1,250 years. And then we came up with the printing press and movable type, which now allowed you to create government documents, which was really exciting for everyone. You could create the same information and share it with the same copy of information, share it with many people all over the world, which then led 400 years later to the telephone, which allowed you to actually have a real-time conversation and transmit information. Now, people who were unhappy with somebody could pick up the phone and call you and tell them, fix my street, etc. This led 100 years later to the internet. Who here was working in government in 1994? So pre-1994, no email, no web, no mobile phones, anything. And today, this very incremental, slow development of technology, of really the basic idea of being able to proliferate, transmit information, be able to have communication, express what the rules are, get feedback on the rules, participate in that process, has completely exploded. So 20 years later, after we were using dial-up modems, we have all of these amazing tools. And it's totally, completely overwhelming. We don't know how to use them differently at home, work, family, friends, and how to think about how to use these tools for public institutions We're at the very, very, very beginning of that. And, you know, oftentimes they call epochs in history based on the technology that was available. There was the Stone Age, there was the Bronze Age, and I think, you know, if you go 500 years in the future, they're going to talk about the age that we sit in today as the age of the internet. It's fundamentally transforming society, as we've talked about today. But these tools are very challenging for us to figure out how to be effective and how to use them. And I think there's been a lot of great information today. So what I'm hoping we can bring up our panelists, and we're going to start with LinkedIn. And we have a panelist from Instagram and a panelist from Facebook. What I'm hoping that they can do is just to think about their platform as really a communication tool for public institutions. How do you transmit information? How do you engage with your citizens? How do you have a dialogue, as was talked about in the last panel? And how can you do that effectively and provide some examples? So I'm going to bring up our first panelist. Our panelist is Allison Dorsey. She's the social impact manager at LinkedIn, and she focuses on connecting LinkedIn members with nonprofit and government service opportunities as skilled volunteers and board members. And Allison's going to have a few remarks, and we can ask some specific questions about LinkedIn, and then we'll bring up our next panelist. So thanks, Allison.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So who here has a LinkedIn profile? It's good to see. Which of you uses your LinkedIn profile to promote your city or your nonprofit? Okay, so this is what my job is, figuring out how our tools can be more useful to nonprofits and to city governments. So, you know, your LinkedIn profile is your professional identity, and LinkedIn is the world's largest professional network with over 300 million members. And I think in the past, people have thought of their profile as a way to advance their own careers, which it still is. But there are also a lot of ways now where you can use your LinkedIn account to benefit the organization where you work and also other organizations that you support. So a couple years ago, we added a profile field called the Volunteer and Causes field. Does anyone have that? All right. So that's where on your profile, you can add the causes you care about, the organizations you support, your volunteer experience, and how you'd like to give of your time and talent in the future. That last part is a pretty new part of the field, and it's really important to us because it's us asking that question like it's an expectation, that it should be a total social norm that everyone is donating their time and their talent. So we want to ask every professional that question and have them represent it on their profile. We also recently added a tool called long-form member content. So it's like a couple weeks old. And so you now can blog through your LinkedIn account. And one of the big benefits of that is that your audience is already built in. Everyone you're connected to is already following your blog, so you're going to get a lot more engagement than if you started a new website. So that can be a great way for mayors or other community leaders to be talking about what's important in your community and having a lot of people read that right away. We also see a lot of groups using the groups tool. So last week I was with the Mississippi River Mayors Association, which is all the towns along the Mississippi, and they've realized that a lot of their professionals do business with one another. So some of these towns have 5,000 people. Those 5,000 people are not enough for these businesses to become very successful, so they rely on the professionals in other towns to support their businesses. So they've now created a group of all of the cities and towns along the Mississippi to have their professionals join this one group and do business between one another. So we've seen groups be used in that way. And then what I spend most of my time on and what I'm really excited about is the volunteer marketplace. So in January, we launched the ability to use our jobs infrastructure for volunteer and board positions. And a lot of people ask, like, why would you do this? How is this good for LinkedIn? So the real reason why we do it is because all of our members want it. 82% of LinkedIn members want to use their skills to volunteer, which is a whole lot of people. And there's this big myth that we like to call the volunteer gap, where everyone thinks that there are too many needs and not enough people to solve them. And the reality is that in the last few months, we've seen 2 million members check this box saying that they want volunteer opportunities, and we've seen 9,000 volunteer positions get added. So it's actually the opposite. We have way more people looking to serve than we have scoped opportunities ready for them to fill in. So the most exciting thing that I think you all can be doing on LinkedIn right now is posting your opportunities for your citizens to get involved. I think Krista said a great thing where she was talking about social media management and how, she is a social media coordinator, and so the County of San Mateo has a great benefit in that they have her helping manage that community, but not everyone has a social media manager. But actually everyone can post to recruit a volunteer social media manager. And it's actually the #1 most popular volunteer posting on LinkedIn. So if you do anything, please have it be to post a free job description to recruit a volunteer to manage your social media channels for you, because so many people around here really want to do that. The same thing is true of boards and commissions. So last week while I was with the Mississippi mayors, I was also with the mayor of Memphis, and Memphis is doing something really interesting where they realize that their boards and commissions are filled by the same people a lot. This is true, all over the country, that people sit on a board, a position opens up, the people that hear about that opening are the ones who are kind of in the loop on serving their community, and so there are a lot of other people that haven't heard about that position. And so Memphis had an opening on their music commission. So they posted on LinkedIn this volunteer commission member position, and all these applicants came in, and they're applicants that they never knew before. These aren't people who have been involved in the city government before. They're people who saw this as a recommended job for them on LinkedIn based on their skills and experience and thought, here's an opportunity for me to serve. So it's just a way to get a more diverse pool of candidates for the boards and commissions. That's it.
So before we bring up our next panelist, is there a question or two for Allison about LinkedIn? Anyone? Don't be shy. In the corner?
Yeah, so my #1 thing that I think you should do is post your open volunteer and board opportunities. So I go to a lot of city websites looking at the commission listings, and they're frequently there. The commission listings are already scoped out. So if you just copy paste them into volunteer job descriptions on LinkedIn, it'll help a lot. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Thank you.
I don't think we've gotten our commissioners posted openings.
Okay.
That's a good idea. I guess my question is, when and how for our organization to start using LinkedIn rather than like me, Rebecca Zito, posting a press release about San Mateo to my LinkedIn account or our city manager's LinkedIn account, like creating an organizational LinkedIn account, does that become appropriate? I mean, I guess anytime, but
yeah. So it's actually a company page. So you will keep your own accounts, and then within your account, you'll create a company page for the city, and you can post those updates there on the company page. It's also really helpful if you have a group. Usually groups have some sort of theme, so it could be people interested in water conservation in San Mateo County, or it could be people interested in volunteering. You could choose whatever is topical at the moment for a group, but then you can post those sorts of announcements into the group as well.
Okay. So thanks, Allison. Have a seat. We're going to bring up Charlton Golson, from Instagram, who manages strategic partnerships for public figures and big events for Instagram. So come on up.
Thank you. Hi. How's everyone doing? Really? That's all? Just good? There's like tons of really good cookies outside. I don't know if you guys have seen these. Hi, I'm Charlton, and as Cameron mentioned, I run public figures and major events partnerships for Instagram. For us, primarily, what that means are the Justin Biebers and the Selena Gomez's of the world. However, we obviously do love to see our elected officials, especially at the local level, active on the platform. I know you heard from Nikki Jackson Calaco this morning kind of about what Instagram is and kind of how we think about our place in this, which is not hieroglyphics, I was surprised to learn, in the social media space. So I guess I'm going to focus, since you already heard from her about that, on how, kind of what are some best practices, good examples, and then just leave most of the time for questions. So the best way to understand Instagram, and by the way, how many of you are on Instagram? Show of hands. Wow. Yeah. The best way to understand Instagram is just to use it and see how other people are using it. And it sounds like the majority of the room knows that, which is awesome. But I'll tell you one of my favorite public figures who's on Instagram, and that's the mayor of LA. I know it's blasphemous in this room, Southern California. But the mayor of LA, Eric Garcetti, is incredible because what he does really, really well is just post the beauty in his city. And he posts things that he just finds are really, really cool. And people are responding to that. What's really interesting about Instagram as a user, and I work here too, obviously, but I use it primarily, is that people really do respond to everyday beauty, which I find really, really incredible. And so if you're thinking about what to post on Instagram, I follow the mayor's example because he'll find the things in Los Angeles that people will recognize or people will have a visceral reaction to. He'll find things that, maybe his favorite local hot dog stand that is giving him, they wrote in mustard, Pink's loves Mayor Garcetti. Maybe he'll find a praying mantis at the bottom of a fire that just happened. Or he'll take a picture. He took a picture, I think it was a couple days ago, of the smoke as it was clearing out a big LA fire. So that's not something you would think to post. Like, why would a mayor draw attention to the fact that there was a disaster in his town? However, Instagram's about capturing and sharing the world's moments. And so not all the moments can be gravy. And I think as public servants, and I have the greatest admiration for all public servants at any level, but I think public servants often feel like, if I open up that, things aren't always perfect, things aren't as good as I want them to be, as my constituents want them to be. I think that sometimes the right thing to do is to just draw attention to the fact that there is still beauty in something, even when it's not, the picture with the local guy who won a contest, though that's important too. And so what I would say as like your one takeaway for how to think about using Instagram is be yourselves. Be yourselves, post things you think are interesting, post, your own, the kids in your neighborhood, the people on your block, if they're comfortable with that. The things that you actually enjoy, because that's what's going to show through and that's what people are going to respond to. They're going to respond some to, honoring the people in your communities who are doing amazing things, because that's what Instagram is about too, is inspiring creativity and inspiring others to do great things. However, they're really going to respond as, a San Mateo supervisor or, an assemblyman or a school board member. They're going to respond to the things that you really care about and that they put you in office to care about. So with that, I'll just leave most of the time for questions. I stumped you. I guess I'll ask a question. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just thought maybe you could give an example of how an elected official or a candidate might be using Instagram successfully.
Elected official, I would say kind of that first thing of highlighting the great things about, kind of your job and the things you see every day in your community. Candidate's a little bit different because you're really trying to sell something. And that's a really different value proposition for the person who sees your photos in their feed. I think as a candidate, what I would say is almost double down on the things that you find really interesting, because that's what you're selling is, I love these parts of our community. I really care about making sure our schools are better. I really care about making sure we have water to last us into the next decade. I really care about making sure that, we reduce the number of people who are food unsure in our community. And I think that drawing attention to the things that you care about in a way that, kind of inspires people to take action for you is probably the best practice I could come up with. The one thing that I would say is pretty different about Instagram relative to all of these other guys is that as you're posting, you don't think as much about what you're linking to. So it really is just, it's agnostic in that sense. You know, we don't just have the functionality to post links in your posts. So, you know, you can't say like, come join the fight here and people can just click on it. You know, you can put links in it, but they'll just be dead links. So, I mean, it's sad but true. There are 100 brands out there, I'm sure, who would want the same thing. Follow up.
We might have gotten some of that information earlier, but do you see, it seems that the age group that's interested in using Instagram is rising, instead of it just being for my 13-year-old cousin. It seems like there are older people in my family that are using it now. So I wondered if you could comment.
Like 16-year-olds?
And this 45-year-old.
I'm totally joking. Yeah, I think those dynamics are changing. I mean, that's any platform that has a lot of early adopters. They tend to be super young, mostly urban, primarily United States, which is where a lot of these companies are based. But I think over time, as we see what happens in the Instagram community, even as, you know, folks over 20 are joining, is that the content really stays the focus, and we've been really fortunate with that. So I would say that, yes, to answer the question bluntly, yes, the people's ages on Instagram are rising as a result of just having more people on it. However, I think that, you know, you shouldn't think about trying to reach a certain demographic on Instagram, since it really is a feed of whatever people are curating. Rather, I would think you want to reach people who are interested in certain topics. So kind of, again, going back to, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but, you know, you really want to think about what are the things that the people who subscribe to me care about. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. And finally, I want to welcome up Crystal Patterson from Facebook. She's the Government and Politics Outreach Manager, and she can talk about how government institutions, elected officials have effectively used the Facebook platform. So come on up, Crystal.
Oh, do I use that one?
Oh,
sorry,
sure.
I forgot there was one. Hello. I'm dressed like a DC person. When I come on campus, they check me at security because I don't look like a typical Facebooker when I come to work like this. Thank you for having me. I work with elected officials, government agencies, advocacy groups, and nonprofits on how to get the most that they can out of Facebook. Typically, I'm guessing a lot of you see this as well. You've kind of got limited resources and limited time, and so I work to make sure the time you spend on the platform, you're getting the most you can out of it. Given that I could go on for hours about this stuff, I picked a couple of things to kind of zero in on for you today, and then I'll take a couple of questions. For the couple of you who talked to me out there, this might be a little repetitive, so I'm sorry, but this is the stuff that I think really will help you as you're kind of figuring out what you're going to do on the platform. So I'm going to talk first about our algorithm, and then a couple of tools that I think might be useful to you as you're thinking about your outreach efforts on the platform. So our algorithm, how many of you understand the algorithm? Yeah, nobody does, right? I've had a few events where somebody's like, so can you tell us what the algorithm is? And I'm like, I will trade you the algorithm if you can tell me the recipe for Coca-Cola and Kentucky Fried Chicken, because they're about the same level of secrecy in terms of what goes into it. So nobody really knows exactly what the algorithm is, but there are certain things that you can do to help improve how much you're reaching your audience. Because you want your posts to be sticky with people. When I say sticky, I mean you want good engagement, whether people are clicking on things, liking them, sharing them, and showing that they're interested in this type of stuff you're posting. So one thing I suggested to someone here is to kind of have an idea of a content calendar in your mind so that you're posting regularly. We suggest a minimum of 2 to 3 times a day. Ideally, you'd be posting 7 to 9 times a day, but I know that's a lot for most people. There's more than 1.3 billion people on Facebook right now. That's a lot of content that's competing to get into people's feeds. Now, the good thing is that everybody engages with Facebook in a different way, so you can use that to your advantage. So let's say you had a particular initiative you're pushing out of your offices or your organization. What I would suggest you do is when you're coming up with your plans for Facebook, you come up with different forms of media that you can use to share that message on Facebook. So Charlton and I could have the same friends list, like the same pages, but our feeds look completely different. He loves video and photos. I love reading articles. So I see more articles. He sees more photos and video. You want to reach both of us. So you need to be sharing different types of media so that we see your content in our feeds. Does that make sense? Okay. So frequency also matters. Because there's so much content, the idea that you could overserve people with stuff, it's almost impossible to do. At any given time, there's 1,500 pieces of content we can serve someone. The most anybody can really manage to kind of process in a day is 300, which is still a lot. But again, considering how much is available on the platform, we have to, have some sort of standard for how we serve things up. And so that's where the algorithm comes from. So you want to post frequently, mix up the type of content that you're including, and make sure that it's interesting. I think the kind of principles that I think of that apply with Instagram apply with Facebook as well. When you're sharing things, instead of just going through the motions of posting something, think about what it would take to get you to read whatever it is or to engage with whatever it is that you are posting. You want it to be interesting and you want people to care about whatever it is that you're showing. And so make sure you're thinking about that and not just throwing up a link just to throw it up. The other thing is the best pages really focus on making themselves distinctive from everybody else. So while it's good, you should check out what other cities are doing for inspiration. You want to make sure that you adapt it to whatever your organization is doing that will make you special. I showed somebody the city of Minneapolis did a cool hyperlapse video of a parklet they built on a street. That was neat. I'm sure there are a million different things you could do with something like that, but they got a great engagement with it. So that's the other thing. I would just try to be original and creative. And again, creative doesn't mean you reinvent the internet. It just means you try to come up with something that's special for you and your page. Okay, so that's the piece about the algorithm. The other section I want to cover was just a few tools that we have that I think could be really helpful. The first is our native video tool. How many of you have uploaded a video to Facebook directly? How's the engagement been on it? Pretty good? So we've seen a 50% rise in the number of videos that are watched on the platform with our native upload tool as opposed to using YouTube or other outside vendors. Nothing wrong with YouTube, but as some of you who've done digital probably know, the more steps you create for people to engage with a piece of content, the less likely they are to do so. It's like trying to get people to click on an email, right? You really got to kind of motivate people to do it. So with everything we do on Facebook, we like people spending time on Facebook. We want them adding to how much time they spend on Facebook. We want them to be able to find what they want on Facebook. So our native video is part of that process. So people are sliding through the news feed. They can click on a video now and it just automatically plays. And before, you'd have to wait for it to open up in your YouTube app. It's kind of frustrating. It takes a little while, uses up your data, frustration all around. Now, you can upload your video natively, and it's part of a seamless experience, and more people will engage with it. Some other things that are cool, just ideas that I've seen tried on other pages, particularly with members of Congress. A lot of them will do contests on their pages. So they'll have people share photos from their districts or where they live, and then the winner gets their photo featured as a cover photo on the page. So I think that's a neat thing to do. There's also no shortage of opinions on the internet, and you should use that to your advantage. So if you have an issue that's hot in your community or with your organization, ask people what they think about what should be done about it. I'm certain you will get engagement. And then I would encourage you, as the administrator, whoever's the appropriate person in your organization, to engage in the comments and respond to people, whether it's thanking them for giving their input, responding if they have questions, or anything like that. Facebook works best when it's an interactive experience for everybody. So instead of just posting something and kind of leaving it there and hoping something good comes of it, when you get people commenting and asking questions or doing whatever, try to respond to them if it's appropriate. Okay, so that's like the very, very short drive-by version of my usually much longer speech. But I'd love to take a couple of questions just because I feel like this is more about you than me. Please. Hashtags are great. You should definitely use hashtags, particularly if there's a broader initiative that you're part of. We've seen this work very effectively. The minimum wage challenge that a lot of members of Congress do, they were using living the wage or live the wage, and it really helped give lift to a lot of their posts because reporters were looking for it, and other folks who were following wanted to know who else was doing it or who else was involved, and so they could click on the hashtag. The other cool thing that you should be doing is tagging other organizations or groups or municipalities that you're involved with, because then your stuff will help get served up to their audience as well. Thank you for that question. Anybody else? Am I talking too fast? I'm sorry. I feel the pressure of the time limit. And I was a high school debater.
Can you tell us what not to
Ooh, a trick question from Anne Blackwood. What not to do? Did you have something specific in mind that I should be?
I don't know, a bunch of guys standing in suits next to a podium.
Yes. Okay. So we're doing. Thank you. Good one. Good one. So I always joke. Again, I'm on the Hill a lot. A lot of times they think creative photos are having the member shaking hands with someone in front of their office plaque and a flag. That is lovely. It is great civic duty work. It is not interesting Facebook content. It's good. What would be cool, though, is if they posted about the people they met with and talked about what jobs they had in community, what they talked about in their meeting, if they're doing some initiative that brought them to the office, like something that makes that interaction more special. The other thing, I came up with something else, those meme photos that people love to use, make sure if you're using them that they're relevant to whatever work you have going on and that they're meaningful to your audience. Sharing them just to share them because something's clever isn't going to work for you. People tend to hide those more, and they just don't help with the user experience. So be thoughtful and judicious about how you use those.
I have a question, Crystal. So the Facebook algorithm doesn't show every post to every person who likes your page.
Right.
So should local governments be spending money to boost their posts?
That's an excellent question. Thank you. That's a very good question. So yes, boosting your posts is a great kind of cost-effective way to help broaden your audience, and you don't have to spend a lot to see good results. And in fact, you can do some tests on posts. So let's say you put up 10 posts in a week, hopefully more. The ones that perform well, if you boost them, with $25, $50, $100, you can target who's getting them to help broaden the audience. So if you have an initiative on breast cancer awareness, you probably have a particular audience you want for that. Or if you're having, some big event that's targeted towards, older folks in your community, you can target to them on Facebook. If you go to facebook.com/ads, there's a lot of information about how to boost posts, how to do your targeting, and it'll answer a lot of the questions you might have about how to get going. The great thing about Facebook is that it's very easy and it's set up so that you on your own can go on there and just go crazy with how you want to boost your posts and have a paid presence on the platform. And it really, in terms of cost per acquisition, is a great value. You're not going to get the bang for your buck in any other way like you do on Facebook. And make sure you're reaching the right people for the material that you're trying to share. Thank you. That was a great question.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Crystal.
Yes.
So I have just a couple questions, and then I can kick it off to see if there's any last questions. I want to ask a question of Charlton. So we don't have an Instagram account in San Carlos yet, although I personally have an Instagram account. But I think one of the concerns that people would have is, they would create an Instagram account, and then they would immediately have no followers, and it might go that way for weeks or months. How do you get followers on Instagram?
That is the. I feel like $100,000 used to be a lot of money. That's the $100,000 question. Is how do you get followers? There are a couple of things I would say that are interesting, and I think some of this comes from us, and some of this comes from usage. The things that we do are things like we'll try to suggest users that you can follow, and there's a nice kind of symbiosis where when you follow a couple of certain really big accounts, a bunch of people will notice and you'll start to see some followers. That's one way. That's kind of the Instagram side. I would also encourage you to use Facebook to promote the fact that you're joining Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube and who else is on here? Snapchat, really? But wherever you are, wherever you are, I just feel like Snapchat's like the messages go away. How do they stick with you? So wherever you are, you really should try to put links to whatever it is that you're most concerned about growing at that moment. So, for example, Crystal's saying post great content, and she's more of a links type person. There are probably another, at least in the San Mateo area, another 1,000 people on Facebook who read links every single day that they get from Facebook. And so if one of those links is, hey, follow your new supervisor on Instagram, we just joined, excited about building, about showcasing what's great about San Mateo, that's a great way to start out getting followers. The other thing, and she touched on this as well, is interact with someone who has more followers than you. And that is, again, on Instagram side, we don't really have the complicated Facebook algorithm of kind of who sees what, because anything that anyone posts who you're following, you're going to see it. But in terms of trying to find new people to follow, we'll surface some of these newer folks who kind of have a followership or some connection to other people who are nearby and people who are interested in the same kinds of photos that you start to like. So that was the longest answer to a very simple question.
Thank you. So a question for Allison. I'm excited about the new volunteer opportunities on LinkedIn. We have openings on the Transportation and Circulation Commission in San Carlos, and we need good candidates. Traditionally, one of the things we struggle with is trying to find new blood. You have the people who know folks on the city, have established relationships, but you want to get out to new people. And so help me. How do I get new people to join the Transportation and Circulation Commission through LinkedIn?
So our algorithm kind of does it for you. So you're going to post, the volunteer postings are the exact same as a job posting. So the vast majority of Fortune 500 companies are paying $500 a month per job. We're saying, hey, use that exact same system for free to recruit volunteers and board members. So you'd go into the job posting flow through nonprofit.linkedin.com, or I can send you all a special code to do it more easily. So you go through, you get to the job posting. If you already have these positions on your website, you can copy paste them into that job posting, and you start it with the word volunteer. So we all know it's a volunteer position, and then it automatically gets matched to the members with the skills and experience that you've put into that description. So it'll go into their on-site ads. So like when you're on LinkedIn and you're on your homepage, you see jobs that we think are a good fit for you. You now will also see volunteer and board positions that we think are a good fit for you.
And how are those determined? What are things that I could put in the ad that would make it so that the algorithm gets it to the right people?
So I'd say the more standardized you can be in the skills. So we have a section on the job posting for functional area. So it's a drop down. So any of those are kind of popular functional areas. So using those words a lot helps. And filling in the desired skills and experience section completely. I think a lot of people focus on the position description, but there's actually a whole second section just on desired skills and experience. The more information you give us there, the better we can match you.
That's great. All right, a question for you two guys. So a lot of times local government can get a bit tentative when we're posting things because some of the issues that we work on are controversial. People don't like, or there's people on both sides of the issue. I've been in a lot of meetings where people say, well, we can't post that on Facebook because people are going to scream and yell, and then we'll look bad and it'll be public, and we can't take it down because it violates, certain laws. What do you tell people, sort of best practices? How should you think about, wading into controversial issues, dealing with negative responses or comments from citizens? What should we do?
You don't want to go first? You don't want to go at all?
I've spoken too much already.
You're going to get easy questions.
So this is a great question. I would say don't be afraid of putting stuff out there. I think the suggestion I made earlier about posing it in the form of a question, like what do you think we should do about X, Y, or Z, kind of gives you a little space to engage on an issue without actually having to worry about offending anybody or going too strong in one direction or another if you're not ready to do so yet. In terms of engagement from commenters, I actually think when people are debating in comments, it means you're probably doing something right because you're engaging people in something that they care enough about to want to make their opinions heard. I would also suggest on your page putting up some guidance that, there's a certain level of discourse that's kind of required to participate on the page. So if you're attacking other commenters, if you're swearing, et cetera, that kind of talk will be removed from the page. That way people have had fair warning, and hopefully it'll remind them to be respectful as they're debating issues. There's also, if you have anybody that's not quite crossing the line but is being disruptive to the conversation, have any of you used the hide feature for comments? Anybody? So hiding is great because it doesn't delete the comment, but it leaves it there. If you hide it, only the person who wrote it and their friends can still see it, but the other people involved in the conversation who aren't their friends can't anymore. So they get their say, and you saw it, but it's keeping the conversation from getting derailed by someone who's obviously just there to cause trouble. So I don't think you should shy away from controversial issues on Facebook. I think you just, try to be thoughtful in how you engage people on it. Is that, I feel like it was a very politician-y answer, but.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I give a much more cavalier answer, which is they're screaming and yelling anyway. And like Crystal said, the fact that you're willing to at least put it out there that you have an opinion on this, even if your opinion is we should have an opinion, which in a lot of cases is a huge first step, I think it's still worth it to post something about this and get the debate going. Because here's what's interesting. Cameron showed this amazing timeline of the history of communication, which goes back to obviously just people literally shouting at each other, and that was the only way you could debate something. Now we have these tools, all of these tools, including my friends at Snapchat, where you can have this live in one place. And for better or worse, I think that's actually a good thing. And here's why. There are Congress people today who actually, every time they're going in for a vote, they'll post what they're about to vote, and then they can get immediate feedback. And this is on both Facebook and Instagram, but mostly on Facebook, because it's a little bit more, it supports longer form comments a bit better. And I think that's really important because these Congress people who are doing this find that, if they really miss on an issue that their district cared about, or maybe their district cared one way and they kind of had their profiles in courage moment to vote what they thought was in the national interest. That's important, and that's good to know, and it's not something you can get very easily. Direct mail is really slow and really, really inefficient. And you have all these sample biases, so I would just say that it's worth it to take on just because, again, I acknowledge this is like a very valley answer, and I'm not the one in your shoes. But I do think it's worth trying to do.
So maybe this is to everybody. A lot of times in public institutions, we get a little nervous when we're participating in things that are paid for with advertising. And there's big national debate and international debate about privacy, lots of things in the news. What does it mean for, this is sort of a broad question, but maybe you can think of some specifics. What does it mean for institutions or for debate or for citizens to be interacting on platforms where their information is being used for advertising? And, what are there any safeguards or thoughts that you have for the group about how to effectively use the platform with that in mind, or how to effectively talk to citizens about why we use these platforms if citizens have concerns about their privacy?
Want to start?
Sure. I think it's kind of two questions. One is about privacy and the other one's about advertisements. I think on the advertisement side, so much money goes into politics now that being concerned about an ad showing up more often in an update stream is no different than an ad showing up more often on television. So I don't think the ad situation is different on social media than it is in other forms of media. For privacy, I think that it's on us as social networks to be really clear about what our privacy policies are, and then it's on every consumer to be aware of those and choose if they want to be a part of it or not. And so I think that developing conversations on our platforms, you may be interacting with only a subset of the population, knowing that some people may want to opt out of that. And that's why you're having conversations in a lot of different forms, not just on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. And so I think it's very similar to the idea that you want to post videos and photos and articles and different forms of content. You want to be having discussions on different forms of media and in person. I don't know if you guys have a different way of thinking of it.
No, I think we say it differently, but it means the same thing. At Facebook and Instagram, we put a privacy is the cornerstone of our business. And so we're also advertising supported, but we don't have users if they can't trust us to safeguard their information. So we have a framework. We think about transparency, giving users very clear expectations for what our privacy policies are. We want to give them control so that they have meaningful ways to control how their information is used. And we want to be accountable. We want them to be able to give us feedback. We want them to be able to have clear methods of communication on when they feel their privacy is at risk. So we take that as seriously as anything else I've ever seen. And how that relates to advertising, right, is we do all of our advertising with privacy in mind. So we have a saying around here, privacy by design, which means that, we don't ship a product, we don't have any new kinds of ads, we don't have any new products without thinking about, like, how does this affect people's perception in some cases of their privacy? And then, of course, how does it actually affect what information is out there? So, I think as elected officials, you're certainly right to be nervous because there is a large public, debate on the nature of the internet in general for the good of society. However, I think we can, as privacy becomes more of a public conversation. Again, I think it's right for you to be in it as the people who are making the decisions about how their privacy is used and how people can participate in debate and participate in their local communities and their local establishments.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, this whole system we've built at Facebook, and I think on Instagram too, relies very heavily on the users being happy with the experience, and that is like the beginning and end of every conversation I have with folks about what they're doing with their pages, how they want to handle ads. We're working with campaigns now, and some of these field folks who are like crazy about data, they're like, how do we get the data for the people that we show ads to? And we're like, well, we don't do that. Like, that's not how this works. It's not how we operate. The integrity of the privacy of our users is first and foremost with I've only been here a few months, and I was astounded at how much we talk. Given how much people think we don't think about privacy, we're like obsessive about it. And mainly because, again, it doesn't work if the users aren't happy. I mean, sometimes we're too good. Like, I get served up ads, and I'm like, how did Facebook know that about me? But, it's great because it works. And I think it works because it's stuff I'm interested in. I mean, it just kind of freaks me out how well they know me. But for you as, public officials, remember, people have to like your page to get your stuff. So I don't think you should be afraid of engaging with your audience because it is a proactive experience for them to be wanting to engage with you. And also for many of you, you are answerable to these people. You work for them in some way or another, or you're serving them in one way or another. And so I think it's good that you want to be accountable to them in a public way. For a lot of the reasons Charlton was talking about with transparency and accountability, I think you guys can understand those concepts in the work that you do as well.
All right. Well, we're out of time. Thank you, guys. Please join me in thanking our panelists. And I will hand it back over to Kevin.
Thank you very much, Cameron, Allison, Charlton, and Crystal, for some excellent practical advice for not only candidates, elected officials, but public agencies in general. Greatly appreciate that. So I've been given the impossible task of trying to sum up and encapsulate all that we heard today, and that is not going to happen. I'm going to be exceedingly brief, too much good information to properly bullet point for you. Just a couple of notes I've made over the course of the day, lots of discussion, not overtly, but underlying much of this around the digital divide, how we integrate this work into our schools, how do we turn consumers into producers. I continue to be struck by, and this is something that Cameron Johnson, the moderator of the last panel, and I have talked about offline as well, but the gap that still exists in innovation, in spite of, rather, the innovations and the model projects we see in government, the gap that still exists between the private sector and the public sector around customer service expectations, the expectation level is ever increasing among our constituents and the public because they do so much interface with the private sector, Netflix, other online activities. They have that same level of expectation for government, maybe discounted a little bit because of the reputation of government, but we are really in catch-up mode in terms of public agencies, trying to catch up to the innovations that are happening in the private sector. So we touched on some of that today. This is an ever-connected population, as Zane mentioned, that is demanding rapid connectivity. And how do we catch up to that? How do we harness the power of these technologies for the public good? One note about San Mateo County, this room is populated with community leaders from San Mateo County. We are actually an ideal place for innovative model projects. There's no one dominant city that kind of calls the shots like you have in San Francisco or Santa Clara County with San Jose in many respects. We have a history of innovation and collaboration here in our county. So when you hear about things like good coins and social currency, iConstituent, other private sector efforts looking to partner with the public sector, I think we are ideally positioned to do some of that. But just questions around how we incentivize good behavior to create a healthy community, all things to think about, and lots of fodder today for further discussion next year. My staff made a comment about wanting to repurpose some of the signs you see around the room. In particular, I'm going to take this one. It says, nothing at Facebook is someone else's problem. So I'm going to say nothing in government is someone else's problem. That's something words to live by, I think. Just a couple of final notes before I get into the thank yous. There are Facebookers still on site to look at your Facebook page and give you some practical advice on how to improve your page. They are outside of this room. Any presenters that are still left in the room, we're going to try to take a selfie with Warren and I to compete with the Academy Awards selfie. So hang around for that. That's really exciting, I know. So with that, let me get to the thank yous, because so many people have spent hours and hours to pull today together. First, I want to publicly recognize the sponsors of Connect14. Facebook, for opening their doors to host the event, for their staff, their technical expertise. In particular, we'd like to thank Ann Blackwood, Director of Government Affairs, who you met this morning and who stuck it out all day here, although this is home base for you, so you didn't have to go too far. But thank you for being here. And Krista Kobeski as well, who handled all of our facility needs. Second, SAMCETA, the San Mateo County Economic Development Association, Roseanne Faust, who is still here as well, and her team. They were instrumental with lots of behind-the-scenes support. Our other event sponsors, the County of San Mateo, the Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber of Commerce. And finally, none of this would be possible without the planning team from the County of San Mateo that executed on our vision. Asia Betancourt McCarthy, Krista Biggie, Eric Forgard, John Ridner, I apologize if I mispronounced that, Bev Thames, John Walton, and Marshall Wilson. On Marshall Wilson, I want to thank Marshall. This is his last day with the County of San Mateo, and we are very grateful that he chose to spend it here with us. Thank you, Marshall, for all of your fine work, not only today, but in the many years past with the county. We will miss you very much. And a big thank you to Supervisor Warren Slocum's staff, Carol Marks, Marcy Dragon, Maya Perkins, and Irving Torres. And finally, my district office staff, all of whom are superb: Mario Rendon, Joe Fazio, Ben Cohn, Carol Ong, and Virginia Kroger, and all of our interns and volunteers who were with us today. And now the most important part of the day, I'm going to turn over to Warren, the raffle.
Okay, so we're going to ask Ann if she's still here to come up and draw the
Ann Blackwood is going to draw the winning. Should we tell people what it is, or is that the surprise? I don't know, actually. I wasn't in on that meeting, so.
Go ahead, tell them. It's actually, if you'd like an Apple Watch, you could win it here. But what we did was we just got a $350 gift certificate at the Apple Store. Okay, so you can use it any way you want. But the rule is you have to be present to win, right? You have to be present to win. So mix it up. Here we go. Drum roll.
Leah Turk is not.
Sorry, Leah.
Mike O'Neill. All right.
Yeah, it's right there. Congratulations. Let us see the Apple Watch when you get it, will you?
Yeah, post it on Facebook.
Okay, with that, the meeting is adjourned. The conversation continues. I think that Facebook is going to archive the live streaming, and we're going to segment the sessions, and those will be posted on connectsmc.org, as well as Kevin's site, I think, and the county's site. So thanks, everybody, for coming. See you next year at Connect 15.